The Salty Sales Sages. Hello and welcome to the Salty Sales Sages. Today we're going to be talking about RevOps, which means revenue operations. And Simon is going to start with the first question and introduce our guest.
This is Simon, obviously, from the Salty Sales Sages, and we've got here today Jeremy Steinbring, who's the founder of RevOnyx. And Jeremy's actually on a mission to help tech and SaaS companies get the most out of their RevOps systems, rather like a lot of successful entrepreneurs. And he's got a knack for breaking down complicated tech stacks and making them work smarter, not harder. So he's the guy I call, and he's the guy you should call when you want your systems to actually make your life easier and drive real revenue growth. He's a passionate advocate of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. Look it up and please donate. And that's inspired by his first daughter, Amelia, who has CF, and now he has a second daughter, Lennon, who also has CF, sadly. I hope you don't mind me mentioning that, Jeremy, but that was probably the reason why we first connected, because I grew up with a family who we were very close with, who has cystic fibrosis, and my mother was really deeply involved. So that was just one thing that we really connected on.
Absolutely.
Anyway, welcome.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for kind of the overview. And of course, cystic fibrosis, CF, we all have lives outside of work. And honestly, nothing is more personal than business. So I'm happy that you mentioned it and happy to be here.
All right. Good man. Good man. Okay. So RevOps is a relatively new discipline, I think. It feels like that to me, as I'm an old fart. And I think means slightly different things to different people. So how would you define RevOps and your role within RevOps?
Yeah, it's a great question. And thank you for asking it, because I think a lot of people are asking that question to themselves. There's not a straight definition that you can get, out of the dictionary. It seems like everyone I talk to, even in the industry, has a different idea of what it is and what it means. I mean, to me, while it can mean a lot of different things and the words in a definition can change, it's how your go-to-market teams function together to drive efficiency and more revenue. And so that might look differently depending on the industry that you're in. I think for most of our clients and the people we help in the SaaS and B2B tech space, that's marketing, sales, customer success, support, finance, product. I know a lot of folks are moving to more PLG, everyone's hands off, AI, agents are doing your selling for you. That's the world that I'm sure we'll touch on at some point and talk through, but it's how those teams interconnect and how we get customers through their journey as efficiently and successfully as possible.
I think the thing is that there are so many solutions now, right? So in the old days, I obviously come from a pre-internet, pre-email, pre-CRM world. When I was first selling and building out sales teams, we didn't have any of that stuff. But nowadays, that is like a CRM system, for instance. Everybody has a CRM system. And I think a lot of people think of that as just, well, that's the sort of revenue operations. But the truth is there are so many solutions that surround that, from tools that help you research opportunities, tools that help you get better at pitching, your CRM system, AI tools like Fathom and Otter that record calls. And then that's before you get to now the increasing use of things like ChatGPT and Perplexity and those kinds of solutions. And I think the trouble is, in loads of these organizations, they've got these tools. None of them really talk to each other. And I think people get overexcited and buy these things and don't really know how they should be used.
I think there's a lot of things that get you to that point. I think one is a lack of education, and how could somebody know what all of these systems can do? So I think there's a gap in knowledge of understanding what tools you should buy and invest in and where they overlap. I mean, just in general, most SaaS products are trying to get their customers to buy and expand their relationship. So the nature of that means that they're constantly inventing new ways for you to use their tool. And so you find that systems overlap in features, but they are inherently different. And you can't keep up with the speed of technology. I would also say we usually have one of two problems. Either systems are not connected or systems are over connected. And when I say over connected, I mean over complicated, over engineered. It's never usually the perfect balance. And I think over time, as a business grows, it'll experience both. And I think doing it at the right speed with the right tech stack, having the right information can help you make the best decisions.
Do you remain in touch and work with your customers for a long period of time? So you help them get set up, trim stuff, maybe, or add stuff that's more valuable, make sure it's properly connected, and being used. I mean, that's the other thing, right? So I come across organizations where even the basic stuff like the CRM system is there, but it's not being used properly. It's either empty, half empty, or being badly used or only partially used. So do you work with organizations all the way through? Do you see, helping them at the beginning and then as they grow, swapping stuff out, changing things, tweaking stuff?
I think it's a mixed bag. I mean, we really look at our engagements as partnerships. And a lot of the change that we're trying to make can't be done in a 3 month time period. I mean, there are certainly projects and one-off things that we do, but most of the vast majority of our customers stay with us for, at least 12 to 24 months, I would say. And what's interesting is the work doesn't stop, but where we kind of hand things off is when the customers have their own process. We've helped them build that. They're ready to invest in their own team members internally, and we can be more of an advisor long term. But what's interesting is from the RevOnyx perspective, we kind of see it through the lens of a journey, right? So earlier stage, you might just be getting into the CRM game. A Google Sheet doesn't work anymore. You're getting a little bit bigger. Usually this is between 30 and 60, 70 people where they invested in a CRM, Salesforce, HubSpot, all of the CRMs that are out there. And once you start building on top of that and you start buying ancillary tools and you start integrating them, you start moving into kind of the second phase of your RevOps tech stack growth. So you're beyond the basics in your CRM, you have the right architecture, the right data, but now you're trying to expand upon what you can do with third-party tools, enriching data using AI platforms. And then the third piece, which is relatively new, is how you're replacing manual human work with AI, with agents, with auto enrichment, with workflows across multiple systems. And there are kind of multiple evolutions that a business will go through. So like through my eyes, we help our customers get to that last section, that last milestone. But what's interesting is as the business grows and changes, you will break the business. Every time a business doubles, you break all of your processes, you break your go-to-market motion, you offer new products. And anytime that happens, you have to apply the same fundamentals in a different way to make sure that you can make it through the next plateau. And every business does that. So one of the biggest pieces of feedback I get from customers, especially go-to-market executives that just join a new company, is that our CRM is broken. It's not set up properly. It was 6 months ago. That's the issue, is that no one's maintaining it. So a lot of times I tell customers, it's not that what was set up was wrong. You've just outgrown how it was configured. So you don't have the right process in place or the right systems in place to make sure that it gets updated and moves at the speed of your business. So we help customers do that, and we kind of give them the insights that they need to hopefully be self-sufficient. And where there's new tools and new functions where they need an extra hand, we're there to help them.
That's such an interesting way of thinking about it because we all know that businesses, from an executive standpoint, the requirements for a business to get you to 1 million are different to the requirements from getting 10 to 20 million, right? You need a completely different skill sets and quite possibly different executives actually doing that stuff, right? Doing
Exactly.
the
Yep.
work. So I'd not thought about it in terms of the processes and the technologies that you would use, but of course it's absolutely right, 100% right. That's interesting. Yeah.
Is there a virtuous cycle that people should, senior managers or managers of the system should focus on to make sure that they don't get away. They're never in a position where they've gone too far away from the system working. Is there something that needs to be looked at in every sales meeting to say, let's make sure we stay on top of the CRM system? Is there anything that they should be looking for or asking that breaks?
I think planning is most important, because I think a lot of times we can make decisions and it's the right time for the business, but we've not really thought about how we're going to operationalize it, or it kind of falls by the wayside. It's a we'll figure it out later.
Mm.
Where I think the teams that don't struggle as much as what I've just described, they're bringing their ops and RevOps people into the decision making room so that when they're deciding, okay, we're going to offer a new set of products that's going to be PLG instead of SLG, and we're going to have an agent support them, and they make that decision. But then when it comes time to operationalize it, there's a lot of breaking points. Is your current system ready to make that transition? Most of the time, the answer is no, because the investment is not there. A lot of people feel it like that it's a cost center versus it should be a part of the strategic decision making, like how to operationalize effectively new changes that are coming.
I think that's 100%. But I do go all the way back to what I said at the beginning, which is I think that people don't really understand what RevOps is. A lot of companies I talk to, they can't even get their bloody sales and marketing people to talk to each other properly. Okay.
Mhm.
And here we are trying to talk about revenue operations, which is another thing that encompasses both sales and marketing and other areas of the business, and making sure that they all the information is contained and working properly. Because there are so many systems out there, and you could probably list out 50 systems just like that, right? How does a typical B2B small or mid-sized company work out which pieces of technology they should buy, and how those technology solutions should work to derive real value for them? How do they figure that? I mean, CRM is kind of obvious. Everyone knows they need to have a CRM. What else? How do you figure that out?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, the true answer, there's a lot of different ways that you can have a successful tech stack. I would say the most important thing though is that you understand your customer journey. You understand how a customer buys. You understand all of the different ways that you can influence a customer buying, and you understand how you're going to support that customer once they become one. And so I think a lot of times we're trying to solve the technical problem first and the business process second. I would say one of the things that I always see customers who feel like they're overspending or they're frustrated with their general tech stack and their tools and they don't have the clarity they need, that is the crux of the problem. The crux of the problem is that their go-to-market teams are not aligned. They don't have a clear view from a business standpoint of how, I always use the name Bob, I don't know why, but how Bob lands on the website, learns about the product, makes a purchasing decision, stays a customer, becomes an advocate. They don't have that visualization. They have it through the lens of strictly marketing, through the lens of strictly sales, through the lens of strictly CS, finance, so on and so forth. They don't have that overarching view. And so what we do, one of the exercises that we do with some of our customers is that we help them map out visually in whatever tool you want. We use a tool called Puzzle, which is pretty helpful. It's built for RevOps professionals, but you could use Lucidchart, Miro, any of them. And you actually map out how a human goes through this process to make that buying decision and all of the different places where they can be influenced. Leave technology out of it for a moment. Because the first thing you're going to find is that there are gaps that you didn't realize are gaps. You're also going to find that there are places where people get stuck. And those are your places, and those are the opportunities for improvement from a process perspective, or like a training perspective, or maybe there's something you could be doing to speed up how they get to the right place, or uncover where there are opportunities in your product or your positioning or messaging or who you're talking to in your ICP. So that's number one, table stakes. Very few folks that I talk to actually have that diagram
I agree.
across the entire company. There's no connective tissue between the departments and no communication about it. As another topic for another day, those are also the folks that typically have a lot of animosity. We always hear Why is the customer upset? Well, sales sold them something that we couldn't do. Why, and that's where that comes from, because there is no connective tissue. We're all operating independently. Once you have that vision, though, it's very clear to know what tools you need to support that journey. Because if you have tools in your tech stack that do not influence how quickly and effectively we can sell or maintain or expand customers, that's on the short list for stuff we do not need. That's the bells and whistles that you've paid for over time that potentially aren't actually attributing to more revenue. And so when you think about it through the journey and the process first, and then try to think about how you're actually operationalizing internally that journey, you'll find opportunities for consolidation. You'll find opportunities for AI, which I think has been everyone's mind. That's what they're trying to do. And I think they're going to find opportunities where there are gaps and where there are handoff gaps internally. There's so much revenue leakage. Your next $10,000 is probably already with an existing customer. It's already within your pipeline. You have it. You've identified it. You're just mismanaging it because you don't have that visibility. So just going through that process is massive. And I think anybody has the ability to write that down and take the time to do it. Just so few do.
I think that's so true, and it's one of the things. Funny enough, Greg and I were talking in a previous podcast about a lot of sales organizations just don't think in terms of a customer's journey or a buyer's journey at all, right? Ever.
Mm-hmm.
They think about everything from their standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we were talking about this in a previous thing where, they think about it in stages of their pipeline that's in their CRM, which is, are you a lead? Are you a prospect? Are you a qualified prospect? Have you had a demo? All that kind of stuff, right? Not in terms of what the customer is actually thinking about or doing at any one of those stages, which is a massive amount of stuff that's just hidden from the sales people, right? It's all going on back at their organization. So, but I would challenge. So I think, okay, I think it's entirely possible to map that stuff out as a company, right? Especially with a bit of guidance about, well, what happens here? What happens when they go to the website and they do this? How do you track it? What do you then do, if anything, right? Is there any proactive outreach, or do you send them anything? But the question is then going to be, but what technology do I need that helps me with each of those bits? Because I bet you they don't know that. Even if they do the first bit, they don't know what the technology that will solve that particular problem is.
Yep. And that is the problem that we solve. That's why RevOnyx exists, because so few agencies, fractional folks, people that have just been frankly doing it a long time, so few of them know the difference between different CRM offerings. Again, the technology is changing so quickly and there's so many options that how could an individual do that? And what we find is also in the marketplace, and one of the reasons I started this business is because especially for younger stage companies, Series A to Series C, somewhere under 200, 300 employees, they can't afford 10 people to do their RevOps, right? It's just not plausible.
Yeah.
So how do you know? And the truthful answer is you don't know. You need to get expert help to help you. And that's what we specialize in. I will say there are certain things that you can do if you're doing DIY method and you're trying to make decisions. One of the things that I often recommend is to buy something once and to buy the thing that's going to work for you for now and the foreseeable future. So you don't have to go through migrations or, changes. I mean, change happens, right? But changing a CRM over year is, I've seen people do it. It's not ideal. I think the other thing is investing in tools that do a lot of things and just invest in that system rather than having 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tools that all try to piecemeal together. Because the more integrations, the more data that changes hand between systems, the more that you have to train your users on multiple tools, all of the time goes up, the inefficiency goes down, and the likelihood of mistakes happening increase. And so I think that's why when we usually recommend tools and we go through consolidation exercises, we pick tools that really own their lane and they're like a HubSpot, for example. HubSpot can manage your marketing and your sales pipeline and commerce and content. It's the thing that is the heart, that where you don't need all of your other ancillary tools to connect into it. I think the simplification is very, very important. But the truthful answer is not everybody knows, and there's not one good way. There's just a way that works for you. And there's so much that goes into it. Cost, where you are in the business, are you making money? Are you losing money? Like all of that goes into the tech stack recommendations that we make to clients.
Yeah.
We'll wrap up part 1 there, and we'll look forward to seeing you again next week in part 2, Jeremy. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody, on the Salty Sales Sages.
Goodbye.